Hello and welcome to today's recorded training on procurement. Today's training is specifically for the Child and Adult Care Food Program sponsors and Summer Food Service Program sponsors, but procurement rules are the same for all child nutrition programs. So in today's training, we're going to be talking about what procurement is, why it's important, when you use it, and some basic procurement requirements. So what is procurement? You may have heard us start using this term, and you may have seen it in some of the communications that we've sent to you, but it may be a word that you're very unfamiliar with. Well, believe it or not, procurement is something that you're actually familiar with because you procure things all the time. What do we mean by that? Well, procuring is when you buy groceries. It takes place when you're purchasing a household appliance. It also happens when you're contracting for a house or car repair. So even though the term may be unfamiliar to you, many of the concepts of procurement will seem very familiar. That's because procurement is buying stuff, but actually it's more than buying stuff. It's a multi-step process for obtaining goods, products, and services at the best possible price. One of the easiest ways that I can think of to describe procurement is to describe the procurement process. What I'm going to do is walk you through the steps of a procurement process and then try to put each step into common terms and concepts that you're familiar with. So let's take a look. So the first step in the procurement process is developing procurement procedures. So you can think about this, or what are your rules around procuring or purchasing things? So for your center or for your organizations, it might be who is allowed to purchase things. What are your rules around purchasing? Are you just you allowed to purchase things? Do you let other employees purchase things? Does it depend on where they're purchasing it from? If they are ordering it online, does somebody do that? If it's going to the grocery store, is somebody in charge of that? When I think about my own household and I think about our procurement procedures, it might be something like telling my teenage children that they're not allowed to go online and buy whatever they would like. So again, developing procurement procedures is the first step in the process. We're going to talk more about it later, but just know that that's what it means, setting up your rules around purchasing items. So the next step in the procurement process is forecasting and planning. So what do we mean by that? That's basically think about making your grocery list. What do I need? How much do I need? How big of a time am I planning for? Am I buying groceries for a day, for a week, or for a month? So again, it's that thinking through how much do I need and when do I need it? This is where you'll also take into consideration how many meals you're planning. So how many children are going to be in attendance? How many sandwiches do you need to make? Or whatever item is on the menu. So again, the second step in the procurement process is forecasting and planning, and that's deciding how much and when do you need it. The next step in the procurement process is selecting the proper procurement method. Now for this is where the federal regulations really take effect and are very prescriptive on how much money you're going to spend and what rules you have to follow for procurement. So again, it's based on the value, the dollar amount that you will be spending. In a later training, we will go into detail about the different procurement methods and the dollar value that is attached to each of those methods. The next step in the procurement process is developing specifications or solicitation. So what does that mean? That's when you decide what kind or type of items and what features. So if you think about a grocery list, this might be where you decide, do you want fresh apples or applesauce? What features do you want something to have? So think about when you're buying a washing machine. What features do you want it to have? What functions do you want it to have? So again, developing specifications or solicitation is just a fancy way of saying making the determination about the kind and type of products that you need. The next step in the procurement process is evaluating quotes, bids, and proposals. So this is when you determine who has the best price that meets the specifications I'm looking for. So maybe if you're trying to purchase a car and you know what kind of car you want, you know what kind of features, this might be where you go to different dealerships and compare the item that you're looking for, who has the best price, but with a car that meets all the features that you would like. The next step in the procurement process is purchasing and awarding the contract. So this is where we actually get to buy something. So sometimes when people think about procurement, this is a step they think about, the actual purchasing. But the point that we're trying to make today is that there's all these steps that go into the process before and after you actually make the purchase. And then one of the final steps in the procurement process is receiving and managing the contract. So for this, think about after you purchase something, did you get what you paid for? Does it have the qualities and features you determined that you needed? So maybe you did buy that new washing machine, it gets installed, you go to use it, and suddenly you realize that it doesn't do what you thought it should, or something of the feature doesn't work. That would be a concern. That's receiving and managing the goods that you've purchased and evaluating. So why are we having to talk about procurement so much in child nutrition programs? Proper procurement has always been a requirement when you're using your federal funds. This makes sure that we take federal funds that are taxpayers' dollars and we efficiently and economically use them in compliance with the rules and the laws. There's been an increased focus when there was the passage of the Uniform Grant Guidance, was back in December of 2013, but it provided more details and further clarification for federal programs. USDA has also placed an increased focus on procurement in child nutrition programs. Thus, we're passing on that information to you, our sponsors. When we think about procurement, we think about good use of federal funds and also the idea of embracing competition. When there's a lot of competition, it means that there's a level playing field. And when there's a level playing field, it means more people, more vendors are participating and offering their services. And then if we have more vendors vying for services and offering us items to purchase, the cost of these products and services will be lower. So in the end, we end up using our federal money more efficiently and effectively. The procurement process ensures that the sponsor receives goods and services from the most responsible vendor, from the most responsive bid, and at the lowest possible price. Again, it's the best use of federal funds. On this screen, I'm showing you the quotations for the rules, the law of procurement. So they can be found in 2 CFR 200 and 7 CFR. As part of the child nutrition web pages, we've dedicated a set of pages to procurement. On these pages, you will find links to many of the resources that we are developing to assist you in implementing these procurement rules. One of the items that you'll find on this web page is a document that provides links to all of the federal regulations and all of the USDA guidance pertaining to procurement. So when do we have to follow procurement rules? Anytime you decide to purchase, you have to use the procurement process and follow the procurement regulations. So it doesn't matter if you're spending $500 or $5,000. There's the process that must be followed and rules that must be followed. Procurement often feels like a whole nother language. One of the documents that we have prepared for you is called Procurement Vocabulary. It is available on the web page that I referred to just a minute ago. This is a great resource to print out and have handy, so when we're talking about procurement, you can look and see some of the different terms and make sure you understand what we're talking about. So as I mentioned before, there are several procurement requirements. The first step in the procurement process that we mentioned earlier was developing procurement procedures. So remember, these are your rules and the steps to what you do in purchasing. One of the requirements of for federal nutrition programs is that you have to have a procurement procedure plan. A procurement procedure plan is a written document that describes how your organization will conduct procurement transactions in accordance with federal, state, local, and tribal laws and regulations. So it's required that you have this. It helps you determine procurement methods to be used. It prohibits conflicts of interest and includes a written code of standards of conduct. On our webpage, we have a document that talks about the procurement procedure plan. On it, you will see a bulleted list of all the items that need to specifically be included in your procurement procedure. We're also working on developing a template that will also help you complete this step. One of the particular items that need to be included in your procurement procedures is direction and written definitions of minority business enterprises. So in your procurement procedures, it specifically needs to say that you will solicit minority business enterprises whenever they are potential sources for purchasing when economically feasible, and that you'll establish a delivery schedule which will assist minority business enterprises to meet deadlines. The specifics on this exact language that needs to be in your procurement procedures are included in that reference sheet, procurement procedure. One of the items that needs to be included in your procurement procedures is a code of conduct. We also have a reference sheet that talks about the code of conduct. The code of conduct governs the ethical conduct and action of employees. Sometimes it's called the conflict of interest. So why do you have to have a code of conduct? Well, for one thing, it protects the reputation of the sponsor. So again, remember that these are federal funds that you are using. You want to make sure that it's clear to everybody that your organization is reputable and you are using federal sources in a responsible manner. Having a code of conduct also proactively prevents unethical behavior. It helps employees understand and avoid unethical behavior, and it clearly lays out the consequences of unethical behavior. So again, if you're thinking about your staff and you allow other folks to do procurement practices, meaning that you allow them to do your grocery shopping, you want to make sure that they understand that when they go to do that grocery shopping, purchasing items for their own personal use or benefit would not be allowed, and what would be the consequences if they were to do that. So what's next for you? Well, we plan to offer you more trainings, recorded and live webinars to help you understand the procurement procedures and the procurement rules. We encourage you to visit the OSPI Child Nutrition Procurement webpage and start looking at the procurement documents that are available for you. And we also encourage you to start drafting that procurement procedure plan, including the code of conduct. And again, you'll find the resources on that webpage to assist you in doing that. Thank you for spending the time to listen to this training, and we look forward to you joining us for trainings in the future. Thank you.